So folks, appreciate you watching. Thanks for tuning in. So, how can you pass the GED test without studying? Start off by saying I don't recommend it. You should probably do some light reading, watch some YouTube videos. Just Google it a little bit, research, kind of get a feel for what you think is going to be on the test from other people's opinions and that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I did not do too much studying to pass the science, social studies, and language arts, but I did do a little bit of studying to pass the math. Math is a subject that I've always struggled with, so I knew that I needed to brush up a little bit no matter what was going to be on the test, whether it be fractions or word problems or decimals or polynomials. Had no idea what the hell that meant. I figured that I would have to do some studying in the math, but I wasn't sure if I'd have to study for the other subjects. So once I logged into the GED website and set everything up, they offer 4 practice exams. What's wrong with me? They offer 4 practice exams. So I'm like, all right, well, they're $6 each. I'll go ahead and take them and kind of see where I am. So of course I wanted to take the math first to just kind of get an idea. So I pay for the math, take it, and when I didn't understand the question, I literally just pulled out my phone right there and just kind of looked it up and tried to understand how to answer the question. So I did that. It took about 45 minutes, and it gave me a passing score. I'm like, cool, all right. I had no idea what I was doing. All the questions that I knew I didn't know how to answer, I was Googling them, so I knew what I needed to study. So I kind of just basically searched YouTube for videos on polynomials, how to add and subtract and divide and multiply fractions, and that kind of stuff. And everything else I was pretty comfortable with, and everything else was basically like word problems, percentages, plotting points on a graph. So nothing too crazy either. So it would say something like if you run 20 miles 7 days a week, and your goal is to get to 100 miles, how many days of the week do you need to run before you get to 100? Right? It'll be a question like that. So just kind of think, all right, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. All right, we'll have to run 5 days. So that would be the answer. So things like that, I was pretty comfortable with. Plotting points on a graph, it was just kind of your X and Y axis, and it was just something like maybe the top number 20 and the bottom number, or the bottom axis maybe the number 5, and it'll say plot the point to 10. So you go to number 2, you go to the number 10, and you put a point right there, and it's pretty basic graphing stuff, nothing too crazy. So I was pretty comfortable with that. So I'm like, all right, well, the test says that I'm likely to pass, so I'll go ahead and schedule the math test and do a little bit of studying, watch these YouTube videos, take a couple of practice exams, like the free ones that you can find anywhere on the internet. Just search free GED practice exams and you'll see them. And I was still doing pretty poorly on all those practice exams and all the questions that I wasn't too comfortable with, but I was pretty confident that because that the GED practice exam told me that I was ready to go, that all right, I'm going to go ahead and take the test, and if I fail, I fail, but at least I'll know what I need to work on. So I scheduled the test 2 weeks out, and I watched a bunch of videos, and I think, like, you know what, I don't want to wait 2 weeks. I want to hurry up and take this test while all this stuff that I've been learning and practicing on is kind of fresh in my mind. So I moved the test up about a week. I take it a couple of days later, pass the test, and it basically told me that you need to work on everything. So you get the printout, or when you log in after you take the test, it shows you your scores and what you should work on. And it told me I needed to work on pretty much everything on the math section, but I still passed. So my advice and tips for the math is focus on what you know. Be very, very comfortable and confident in the things that you know. Take that practice exam so you understand what types of questions will be on the test. I had some very identical questions on the test that I had on that practice exam, so it's very, very accurate. It's basically the same test, but with a few different questions, a few different numbers. Some of the word questions were the exact same question that I had on the practice exam. So it definitely helps. It's definitely worth the $6 to kind of take it in and see where you are. So so once I got my results, it told me that I need to work on everything, but my advice is to just kind of skip over the stuff you don't know, because there was a lot of questions that I had no idea, and I was literally just guessing. I didn't want to waste my time to try to write it down, because if I didn't know how to solve the question, I was never going to know. I wasn't going to figure it out at that testing time, so I would just guess, and I guessed on probably about at least 9 or so questions, and they were all related to like polynomials and adding and subtracting polynomials and simplifying them and things like that. So yeah, also the geometry, I forgot all about that. So like I was comfortable with like diameter and radius and circumference of circles and things like that once I brushed up on it, and triangles all having equal sides, that kind of stuff. But everything else I just completely forgot, like rectangles and squares. Obviously a square has all the same sides, but cubes, rectangles, trapezoids, that kind of stuff, those questions will be on the test. But they do give you a printout that kind of gives you all the formulas on how to find those different things, like the circumference of a circle, or the radius, or the diameter, or the volume area. And whenever they ask for volume, volume is the whole area around. So those types of questions are on there. Also like slope and things that have to do with pi. I don't know any of that shit. So I literally, anytime the question said slope or find something with like a symbol, I just guessed, because I wasn't going to waste my time. So if you're good at that stuff, then great, right? So get all those questions right, and then if you struggle with maybe the word questions, then you don't have to worry too much about that, because I believe that as long as you do well in most subjects, or 50% of the subjects, then I think you'd be fine. I honestly, after I was done, I just knew I failed. I thought there was no way I passed because of all the guessing I did, because of all the questions I just wasn't sure on, and sure enough, I think the things that I did know outweighed obviously what I didn't know. So I remember when I was done, I had about 15 minutes to kind of go back and review your questions. And there was one question that was just stumping me, and I read it for like 15 minutes and I still didn't really understand it. And I just guessed. So I had like 3 minutes to go and review anything else. And I noticed that I had maybe 4 questions that were still unanswered. So I didn't even answer them. I don't even remember how I skipped past it. But I tried to click on them to answer them, but my time ran out. So I ran out of time, missed about probably 4 questions that I didn't answer, and I was still able to pass. So my advice is to take the practice exam. If it says that you're likely to pass, go take that damn test immediately. All right, so that's math. Social studies, same thing. I took the practice exam, scored pretty well, and decided, like, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and schedule the test. Took the science, scored pretty well, scheduled the test. Took the language arts, did pretty well, scheduled the test. All right, so social studies exam. You don't need to know a lot about history. You don't need to remember when the states were incorporated, or the date on the Declaration of Independence, or how we won our independence from the British, or anything like that. No Civil War questions or anything that you need to remember dates or times, or even who participated in wars, what was World War II about, any of that stuff, none of that. It's simply, they put up a reading passage, and you have to read it, understand what they're saying, and they ask you questions based off that passage. So that reading passage never goes away, right? So you'll get a question so say you have a reading from, say, JFK about civil rights, right? About the civil rights movement and his thoughts on signing new laws and things like that. So say it was about JFK giving a speech about civil rights. It'll ask you, what was the speech about? Was it about civil rights? Was it about re-electing JFK? Was it about picking a vice president? Or was it about signing a new law into our new bill into law, or something like that? And then you may have to read it again, because it may be about signing a new bill into law, but it also may be a speech just about civil rights. So just kind of read the wording carefully and see if it says anything about I'm going to sign, or this new law today, or Congress has brought this bill to me and I'm about to sign it. That means that they're signing a bill into law. Or is it just about his thoughts about civil rights and how he feels that this is something that's important for the country? So if it's words like, I agree that this is something that we need to do to make a change. I've tasked Congress with coming up with legislation to bring to me that I can sign, things like that. So just kind of listen to the context and figure out, is it a new law that's already passed, or is it something that he thinks that the country should work on? So, and every question is basically that kind of stuff. So not incredibly difficult, but the best part about it is you don't have to go into the test knowing anything about history. It's basically, I'm going to give you these points, and you tell me what I'm trying to say. Again, take the practice exam. It is literally the same exact test, but with different reading passages. on the real exam. If it tells you you're going to pass, you're probably going to pass. Science is the same thing. Science is basically, you would have a writing from, say, Albert Einstein that discusses his theory of relativity. I think that's Einstein. I'm probably wrong. And you know what? I'm going to scratch that because I'm about to talk about some shit that I don't know. So say it's like about the scientific method, right? So you have a theory, you have, you gather some data, you formulate a hypothesis, and then look up the scientific theory, right? So I'm already forgetting it. I took the test a few weeks ago, and it's already kind of escaping me. So if you remember the, gathering data, hypothesis, and conclusion, and all that stuff from I would say middle school science. This was probably before high school when I was doing this. My high school career was shitty, so we didn't really do real science projects or anything like this. So the knowledge that I had to have been from middle school. But I would just Google the scientific method and kind of understand it. It's pretty simple. It's just kind of like you have a theory, now you gather some data, and now you have an idea of what it may be, and then you do some tests, and then that test fails, and then you do it all over again, right, until you figure out how to solve that problem. So there's a lot of questions based around that scientific method. It'll be a question that say something like, John wants to go and build out a bike, and he wants to see which bike is the fastest, right? So he has two bikes, he has two tires that are both the same. So two different bike frames, four tires, both tires are exactly the same. He has two bike riders that are equal in skill. And one bike rider is riding inside, one bike rider is riding outside, and he wants to figure out which bike actually performs the fastest, right? Which bike frame performs the fastest, the best. What can he do in this situation to make sure that the experiment is going to be successful? So basically, you can't have an experiment and test your theory if both people are not in the same, in the same controlled environment, right? So you have one bike rider that's outside and one bike rider is inside. That's going to be a failed test, or not a failed test. That's going to be a failed study because the elements aren't the same. You don't have controlled elements. So it'll be questions like that to try to see if you understand how to go about the scientific method. So if you think you need a little brushing up on that, just read it. You just Google it and just read a couple of examples. And you'll get it. You'll figure it out. It doesn't take that much. They're not trying to trick you up or anything. They just want to make sure you understand that if you're going to experiment with something, you have to have all elements controlled. All right? So, again, take the practice exam. If the practice exam tells you you're ready, you should go and schedule that test right away. But, again, the questions on the practice exam were identical on the real exam. All right, now the language arts and reading. So that one was the longest by far. I believe it was like 2.5 hours.